How insane is that animal?
This is out of this world. Fantastic. Good, Mama.
Wow, what a way to start off.
Just such an incredible privilege to be out here. It just keeps on delivering.
There you go, there you go. Heart is pumping right now.
3, 2, 1. You are live, you are live.
Look at this, everybody. We've got a live kill.
The cock's holding the tail. It's holding tight. Lucky Wildebeest.
There's nowhere to go. This is a disaster in the making.
This is the first leucistic zebra I have ever seen in my life.
Oh, here comes a lion. Run, little guy. Go on.
Something that I have never seen before in my entire life that you are now watching live.
My heart is in my mouth, everybody.
Look at this. It's gonna make it. It's going, it's going.
This is just too magical. Hi, little guys. That's great, isn't it?
Has it just pretended to be dead? That is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Look at that. Scuba Steve has got a friend.
You got a friend in me. It couldn't be a better morning. This is just too special.
Oh my goodness, we've got a turtle.
How epic is the fact that we're coming to you live from the Chobe River? It's the most incredible feeling to be here. This is live and we're in Rwanda. This is a very, very different adventure, charged with emotion.
Look at that little zebra about to be born. There's the head. Oh, you clever mare. Well done.
I did not think I would ever face my fears like this.
This program features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.
We came out this morning and found this big buffalo bull sleeping in the grass with some red-billed oxpeckers on him. See just a few ear flicks there. We came out this morning here on andBeyond Phinda Private Game Reserve, hoping that the wind, it seems like it is holding up a little bit. I don't know if you can see in the distance, there is quite a bit of clouds that's building in the distance. That the northern tip of Lake St. Lucia or False Bay, and with this buffalo bull just lying down here, and we're hoping that he gets up and comes to this mud wallow. But while he's still resting, welcome from my side to your live safari in the African wild. there's a red-billed oxpecker that's just sitting on top of the buffalo's horn there. And I wonder if these red-billed oxpeckers also just woke up and have come to join this this buffalo bull here while they hope that the sun comes out, I'm sure. But with these clouds forming over in the east over the Indian Ocean, that is not too far away, about 30 or 40 kilometers away from us, I doubt we are going to see the sun anytime soon. Might see a little bit more rain later on. Well, good morning from my side and from Simon's side behind the camera. My name is Djuma, and welcome to andBeyond Phinda Private Game Reserve. We are going to stick with this buffalo bull for a little bit, just see if he wants to start waking up or so, like he's been moving his head around a little bit or so, but I think it might just be because of those red-billed oxpeckers being around him. We got through that are not too far away. And we'll probably see if we can head in that direction. Just gonna keep quiet for a second. Just listen to it and the birds calling in the background. It's very, very wet at the moment here on Phinda.
Imagine having your own secluded African bush home where you and your friends can enjoy the ultimate safari experience. If you sign up to be a WildEarth explorer, this could become a reality. Tumbeta House is located in the heart of Djuma Private Game Reserve, the home of WildEarth. You could win a chance to stay at this intimate wilderness retreat, offering you the rare and highly sought-after privilege of your own home in the bush. The prize includes 3 nights for 6 people and includes daily game drives, a chance to see the WildEarth camp, and have dinner with one of our guides. Sign up to be a WildEarth explorer before the end of February 2021 and you could be heading to Djuma, the place that we call home. Available dates are limited, so terms and conditions apply.
We stopped as the dusk was settling and there was a zebra mare underneath the bush. She was lying down. We didn't really know what was happening, and then we saw it.
Everybody, there's a zebra giving birth there. There's a zebra giving birth. This is a zebra giving birth. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, you clever mare. Well done. It's born, everyone. It's born and it's alive and it looks fine.
This was, of course, an unusual sighting. Normally, herbivores like impala and wildebeest and zebra will give birth during the middle of the day. This is when their predators like lions and hyenas are fast asleep. But as this little foal took its first steps, the dying embers of the day had just gone over the western horizon, and it was just the time that the hyenas and lions were starting to get active and go out foraging. This is why we didn't light up the sighting, of course. It may have compromised the zebra's eyes and at the same time attracted those hyenas and lions to the activity.
My name is Lauren and I'm currently working in Djuma Private Game Reserve here in South Africa. I love answering your questions during the live safaris. It's my favorite part. It feels like you're on the vehicle with me and I'm able to teach you exactly what you want to know. If you want to ask a question on WildEarth, then you need to register on our website. Once registered, you must go to the live safari page and ask your question below the live feed.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Tswalu Kalahari. I am Johan, and behind the camera today, it is Morgan. So we are literally live from Tswalu Kalahari, literally looking at this beautiful landscape this morning, seeing the mountains stretching out over seeing the mountains over the landscape stretching out. The breeze is quite cool this morning, thinking about the breeze coming through, thinking about the animals might be reacting a bit differently this morning. It could be that there's some of the animals that might be hiding, but we'll see what we can get to see this morning, thinking about the possibilities are that we'll see from about an hour on or so, half an hour onwards or so, we possibly could be getting some more activity levels happening. And so, but yeah, let's see. Let's take a drive down the road and see what we can get on tracks in this area. We are close to the mountain here at the moment, so possibly we could be getting to a bit of a slower breeze here. So we're gonna later on only stretch over towards the dunes. But yeah, let's take a drive down the road and see what we can get. So as you can see, there's a bit of a cloudy structure still as well in the south this morning, as you're looking at it from over the mountain tops over there. And we've had even a bit of a cloud cover during the evening as well last night. So there's quite a bit of moisture in the air in certain areas that's been happening. So having that particular situation, it could be having quite a bit of a breezy structure happening this morning. So we've been having quite a bit of spotted hyena tracks on the road coming through in certain areas here. Thanks guys, it's much appreciated. All the viewers are saying very welcome. Yeah, so as I was saying, there's a lot of spotted hyena activity in this area, so it's possible that they could have come through to a warthog, which is just further up front in this area. And so basically looking at this particular environment, with that nice warthog in the area, there's a lot of cheetahs sometimes passing through here. So typically in the Kalahari, if you think about what happens in particular open areas like this, spotted hyenas could be following cheetah in areas like this, specifically for scavenging purposes. But the interesting thing is also a lot of animals gain their moisture from this particular environment, come together in these areas, and then they start following each other from that point of view. So this warthog that we're coming up to is actually the warthog. I don't know if you guys remember last year when Dylan was on Safari Live from Tswalu Kalahari side. He was actually swimming in this warthog. And we've got a beautiful Wildebeest male up front. Stunning territorial bull coming through. And he has just come from that waterhole point in the front here. He's actually not too happy actually having us coming through this area. Saying, get out of my area, what the hell, what are you doing here? But yeah, looking at this particular guy, in German they're actually known as a Streifenkanu, and the reason being is the stripes on the sides of the body. Let's try to reverse there, get some a better visual there quickly. He's moved to a certain point now where it's almost a bit difficult to see him. There we go, that's a bit better. So as you can see, those stripes that I was talking about, typically to do with that German name Streifenkanu. Yeah, he's really not keen to stay with us this morning. But on the other hand of things, I mean, what is he doing on his own? You might have heard the stories before as well, looking at what he's particularly doing there now. That is a territorial marking. Now they've got pre-orbital glands situated just in front of their eyes, and what happens is he rubs those glands off onto the particular tree, and it's a scent that he rubs off on that particular tree. So what happens is it transmits messages like sexual status, reproductive status, emotional status, local status, whatever the case might be. And so whenever the females travel through his particular area, it gets to a point that they can literally read the Facebooking, emailing, Twittering situation happening there. So it's really, really, really cool actually thinking about it. But yeah, animals communicate through very interesting, funny ways, thinking about how nature works together. And you would know, even sometimes you get animals like predators coming through just because of animals moving through, smelling particular territorial markings like that. You could have cheetah coming through just reading the menu based on what has happened through this particular area, reading the signs and messages which is actually given through. But yeah, pretty cool actually just to have seen that interaction with the tree and how he deposits the scent marking there. Cool, let's continue down the road and see what we see in the dam at the front here. Okay. So those of you that's been on drive with Deirdre yesterday from Tswalu side, if you look at this particular nest, she touched base on this nesting structure yesterday, but the one we had yesterday wasn't that active. But if you look at this particular one, there's a few birds actually in this particular tree, in this nest. Now, first things first, the sociable weavers, they make use of the mother plants of this environment. Now, the reasoning behind that is because it's a strong, long-lasting tree. Now, the way this works basically is that the particular nest would be built on a strong stem branch with a lot of branches bracing or basically coming off that particular main stem. And then what happens is that they will keep on progressing as the population grow, building the nest bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes. So then what happens is that you got like a whole looping system. Well, basically it's like a hotel full of rooms, and you'll have these openings underneath the particular nest as a point of entrance. And so what happens is that per room you got these two openings, and then it makes a loop to the top, makes a cup on the top and comes down. So each and every room inside has got a male and female in it. And so as they keep on making the population grow bigger and bigger through that way, it gets to a point that the nest will obviously just grow bigger and bigger in that situation. So what makes this nest so important? It's basically that they help other bird species in this particular environment, like ashy tits, acacia pied barbets, pygmy falcons, which is a pretty cool raptor in this area. A small little falcon. And the interesting thing is that you get sometimes situations that some of those rooms goes vacant, and that's the situation where they actually allow other species of birds to come in and enter the nest and actually be hosted in this particular nest. So yes, they help other bird species quite big time in this particular environment. But then also on the other hand, they become food resources for animals like snakes. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes you have the odd Cape Cobra coming into a nesting structure like this every now and again. So yeah, then in our hot summer days and so on, you get to a typical situation where you get easily to, in the month of January and February, you get to 48, 47, 45 degrees Celsius. I mean, it's pretty hot. So typically in a situation like that, animals would easily come into the shade of these particular trees, and then it gets to a point that it's a nice cover situation for mammals particularly as well. We're going to send you over to Phinda.
We came down the road after leaving that buffalo bull that was sleeping, and we found this herd that is slowly on their way down the hill here to our right hand side. You can see there is a few females up ahead there. I think they're on their way to a watering hole that's at the bottom of the hill. This herd of buffalo has not been in this area for a while. It's just come into this area now in the last day or so. Oh, there's a youngster coming through behind the bush. Let's see if it comes past. It's not that one there. There's one with small horns. And then there's a very small baby that was just walking in between them. Keeping an eye on us. You can see These ones here are females because they don't have that big boss or helmet-like horns. They've just got the horns growing almost out on the sides of their heads. So we've only seen a female for now. We'll point out a bull's horns to you once there's one that comes into our view. There you can see the little youngster just next to its mother through the bit of grass or so. Not a very big herd of buffalo. Look at the youngsters licking his tail there, trying to get to an itch at the top of his tail. I can hear some water just to the left-hand side. I wonder if there's maybe a mud wall or so that some of the buffaloes have gone into. Look at that youngster's tongue every now and then, just as it's trying to get to that itch at the top of its tail. I don't know if you can hear the water splashing just off to the side. There's just behind the one bush here next to us a mud wallow. I think there's one of the buffalo in there. Daniel, you're asking how long this youngster will stay with the herd. With buffalo, it's a little bit different to other animals. So they don't necessarily leave the herd. They actually stick with their parental herd or might join up with a different herd. So they are social animals, and the buffaloes have quite a bit of a hierarchy between like older bulls and younger bulls and so on in the herd. But the cows generally stay in the herds, and the bulls also grow up and try and become dominant in their hierarchy. And so there's a big bull walking in the back there. So this youngster might actually stay with the herd for the rest of his life until, if it is a male, obviously, until he becomes really old and then moves away from the herd. There's a few red-billed oxpeckers flying in between the buffalo as well. You can see the youngster just scratching his head on a little twig there. I'm sure it's going to try and catch up with.
Came past that waterhole that we spoke about earlier. We have literally just come past that waterhole that we spoke about earlier, and we have found a set of young cheetah tracks, or young animal that's just come through this area. And so it's literally going south. So we just want to bend around the block here and just see if we can find further tracks that's going further down south. Yeah, it looks like there was actually quite a bit of activity from lots of predators coming through this area. last night. So yeah, we need just to go a bit further south. So a typical area like this, there's a bit of a mixed veld situation here where you get quite a bit of sour grasses, as you can see quite in front of us, that we're bypassing. I'm sure some of the other guys have been talking about lots of the sour grasses, but yeah, then areas where there's a bit of sweet veld coming in. And typically that means that you could get sometimes animals coming through this area, meaning herbivorous animals that feeds on typically the browsing structure of plants specifically. I mean, like your kudus every now and again, much more over to as opposed to your grazers. The reason being behind that is that you could get to a situation of, obviously because the sour grass is a bit more in this area. So you typically get to a situation that every now and again you do get predators coming through, and last night was one of those evenings by the looks of it. Just want to show you guys here something of what we're talking about specifically. This is what we're looking at. Just at the back here, sorry, let me just extend this cable here quickly. So I don't know if you can see, Morgan, can you see this track over here? So what we're literally looking at here is, this is the spotted hyena track coming through at the back here. So you literally got two lobes at the back of the track, and then you got like a kidney shaped like toe over there, and another one over there, and then obviously on the right hand side of the track comes through there and there as well. So spotted hyenas, their tracks are much bigger as opposed to your brown hyenas specifically, and yeah, so you can see there was quite a bit of them. On the other side of the road there's another one walking down here, but typically combining to what we've been talking about, saying what is the mixtures between mixed veld and sweet veld and sour veld in this particular environment. So reasoning being, last night was one of those evenings that animals were just exploring, from animals coming through here time to time. But obviously because of the presence of the waterhole in this area, you get to a situation that there's animals sometimes just coming in for water into this area. Cool. Let's continue driving down the road, continue looking for those cheetah tracks, and who knows, we might even see that spotted hyenas coming through the area. So these mountains that we see on our left hand side here, so Peter's asking, can you obtain a lot of information for tracks or from tracks? Peter, it is absolutely 200% yes. Tracks can tell you everything about the bush. Tell you about food, it can tell you about food availability, it can tell you about what was happening in that animal's mind. It can tell you literally about everything in life in the bush, basically, because animals make decisions from the conditions in the bush. And so the tracks, the way it's moving, the speed it's moving, and all of that. So yes, for sure, you can read a lot of information from tracking and tracks specifically. On Tswalu, this is why we got such a strong tracking team specifically as well, because our trackers is highly skilled trackers that specifically working, some of them has been working over 15 years in this particular industry, and some has been on Tswalu specifically for 20 years. And the stories that some of these guys can tell literally just from reading these particular tracks. And decisions to be made, when to follow the right track at the right time is also very important. So yeah, no, it's definitely, it's a golden tool specifically in the Kalahari to be making use of, specifically to find animals at the right times as well. Now, what do I mean with the right time specifically? It specifically comes down to seeing the difference between animals being mobile as opposed to doing a few things like typically when we've seen that Wildebeest being typically practicing that behavior of communication with the Facebooking, emailing that we spoke about earlier on. But yeah, you know what, even with this bit of a breeze this morning, the Kalahari is still very, very beautiful and special. Look at the rains on the horizon, just at the backdrop of the oryx that we had there just now. And off he goes. He also doesn't want to too much cooperate at the moment. So he got a bit of a fright as we pulled around the bush, because the thing is, with this breeze that we were talking about early thing this morning, animals do tend to be a bit more on the edge. Reasoning behind that is that their senses sometimes gets taken away when the wind gets too strong. So it gets to a situation that you typically could be surprised by another predator or animals that could be causing a threat to them. So that's why animals do tend to be a bit more on the edge when there's a bit of a breeze. But yeah, as I was saying, look at that gorgeous, gorgeous rains on the horizon. There's a few drops coming through in the morning light. I think once the sun is going to be coming through proper, we're going to be seeing a bit of these clouds to be disappearing a tiny bit. KJ, it's you asking a question, is wind more beneficial to predator or prey? You know what, it is actually in a situation where animals, both predator and prey, is in pretty big trouble if the wind gets quite strong. Because the thing is, it gets to a point that wind can surprise everybody. You know what, in the case of a cheetah, for instance, young cheetah, they could easily be surprised if the wind goes in a downward position from them and something comes from that downward position approaching them. They don't know about that animal unless they see it coming. So there could be an attacking situation happening pretty quickly, unknowingly, if you get what I'm saying. So typically that's why animals like cheetahs, for instance, often go to, or the smaller predators, often go to higher elevated positions and points, and specifically it comes down to both are actually in trouble. So they work on it. Animals are also not deliberately going and tucking themselves into bushes. They go to a situation where they elevate themselves quite easily, and just to a bit of a safer point of view. And typically you could get that with RX and your normal general game as well. And it truly just comes down to animals needs to think what they do, more so especially in the Kalahari. So this particular road we're turning onto, you can see how the rains and the flood we had. Now our annual rainfall sits between 250 to 300 mils within a year, within the rainy season. And we literally had 251 mils in some areas within a night's rainfall, actually. So it was pretty crazy, actually. You can see the banks of this road even was washed quite a bit. Yeah, so in the Kalahari and the sandy soils, especially in the dunes and so on, you don't typically get a washed situation often with like washing floods coming through and so on. It generally comes through in a situation where closer to the harder soils, closer to the mountains, that you could get this from mountain water runoff. But look at this gorgeous view. We're entering again, just because of the amount of rains we've been having consecutively, following up on each other, specifically looking at this area. I mean, it's just covered in grasses. Not all of it is sweet grass, coming back to that specifically, but yeah. So Sam, you're asking a question, how did I get into guiding? So that's actually a pretty good question. Look at this gorgeous giraffe. We'll get back to that question just now, Sam. But yeah, this particular giraffe, just quite interestingly, and that'll come to your question of how did I get into guiding, is looking at the tree that he's feeding on specifically. These guys, you'll see there's a lot of mother plants in this environment. Now the mother plant, what do I mean with that specifically is, it is specifically a plant that carries an environment. Now what do I mean with that? If you look look at shepherd's trees and camelthorn trees, it's specifically plants that goes to the water tables in search of water. So literally up to about 60 to 90 meters deep are some of the records to where root structures goes down to fetching the water on the tables from this particular trees, and it drags the moisture to the surfaces. Other plants would specifically drink from this mother plant, like a water flowing tap, if I can put it that way. So if that is the case in this situation, there's a lot of moisture in that particular plant, on the tops even. So that is why that giraffe is specifically feeding on it. And coming back to Sam's question there, if you think about something as magically happening like that, as beautifully happening like that, I guess that's how I got into guiding, because it comes back to the situation of the beauty of nature is so shockingly amazing if you think about it. And when I was a little boy, I grew up on a farm in the where the Kalahari literally meets up with the Karoo. I used to walk around with my granddad quite a lot, and he used to tell me all of these different stories basically of nature and these interactions and interrelationships between nature, fauna and flora as it comes together. And that was touching my heart quite deeply. And it was really, really special to understand the bigger ways of nature as well. And yeah, I mean, this is a speaking example. Sam, you just asked that question at the right time. But how gorgeous is that giraffe actually looking at him feeding early in the morning? So there's a bit of a trick in the trade happening with animals living in the Kalahari. Certain times of the year, there's certain animals that needs to be, well, all of the animals need to adapt to their conditions and climate changing over the different seasons. So what's happening now is, especially in summer times, you'll get very early in the morning. Now, as you look at it, the conditions that we're sitting at right now, the sun hasn't really come over the mountains yet. And that means that there's an extreme amount of moisture in the plants, specifically early in the morning. Now, that camelthorn tree was soaking up from the tables last night during the evening as well. And so what's happening is that moisture is still very present in the plants. So in the summer times of the year, basically, you get to a certain point where animals feed a lot, gaining a lot of energy levels for the early parts in the morning. Once the sun starts baking on the plants, a lot of transpiration as well as evaporation processes happens, and then a lot of moisture is escaping the plants. So what is the actual benefit from feeding in the middle of the day rather than early in the morning? So animals know this condition happens, and they know that this is what needs to be done. So then what happens later on, you get to a specific point that later on in the evenings, you could easily get particular herbivores like these beautiful giraffes to start feeding again, like later on in the evening, just about an hour, 2 hours before sunset, and even into the first stretch of nighttime. So the question comes up, so why is it then that first stretch into nighttime, isn't that just dangerous for your day active animals? Yes, it is, but then they know, typically, especially, they need to go to elevated positions, feed into the last bit of the evening in safer areas where they just literally got to have to wing it, if I can put it that way. Wintertime, from a different point of view, is you could easily get to a situation where animals then stretch that feeding period because the heat intensity is not that high that early in the morning. So animals could stretch their behavior to a longer period during the day. So for those of you that wants to come to Tswalu Kalahari, the wintertime is a very nice time for the civilized safari, where you don't have to get up that early in the morning, as opposed to summertime that you do get up quite like bright-eyed bushy tail. But yeah, for sure, a beautiful, gorgeous giraffe bull. The guy is flickering his ears. Elizabeth, you are asking, why are their tongues so dark? Now, that's a very cool question that you're asking there. A lot of these plants that giraffe is feeding on, the tannin content tend to come out quite quickly as it's a defense mechanism of these particular trees. And so what happens is that the tongue is a visual sign that you could literally see this animal being able to handle that tannin content. And so for that first tannin, shall I say, release from that particular tree, it gets to a point that that giraffe can actually handle that first releases of tannin content coming through, and then later on, eventually, it is gonna stop the giraffe feeding on this particular tree. But you can see how that tree okay, say for instance it was a situation where there's a lot of giraffe feeding on that particular tree. He would have stopped, or they would have stopped feeding much earlier. But now it's just because of him being the only one, the tree doesn't release the tannins that quick enough, as opposed to a lot of them feeding at the same time. But yes, giraffes, the reasoning behind the dark tongue is because this animal was created to deal with high tannin contents at specific times or so, as it is. So it looks like some of the flies are actually irritating him quite a lot around his ears. Actually, there we've got a horsefly and a lousefly actually that's in this particular area, but there's lots of little flies that's been coming out in this particular region from the rains. But yeah, that beautiful, gorgeous white markings behind the ears. A lot of animals would sometimes make use of giraffes because they've got fantastic eyesight. So as they would literally feed, and it's not necessarily always meaning it comes down to animals that would feed on the same food resources that he does, but it comes down to the situation that they will feed close enough to him as he's consuming the plants in that particular area, and as it comes down to that particular point, he will then see trouble, necessarily sometimes coming, and then he alarms by flickering the back of the white ears, and they can see that happening on a long distance, and they would know, okay, well, you know what, it's almost like a symbiotic relationship happening there where they're helping each other out in a situation where the same goes for the giraffe as well, because it gets to a point where the giraffe don't always see on a shorter distance underneath a bush, whereas the antelope could have done that for him as well, so they start alarming for him in that situation. Cool. Awesome, guys. Let's drive a bit further down the road and see what we get further down on that cheetah tracks. So Brian, you're asking if giraffes get hunted a lot by lions. You know what? In certain areas, yes. There's certain areas of Africa that some lions are actually adapted to hunt specifically on certain food resources, if you can put it that way, or prey animals. The Kalahari lions, for instance, is a bit bigger than your average lion in Africa. And it's not to do with the weight-wise, it's more to do with the stamina, higher stamina levels as it is, specifically looking at a taller animal and big feet. And so they strongly build, but they live in huge prides. And teamwork, family units, partnerships is the way to survive in the Kalahari. And so they put a lot of team effort up and about to pull down giraffes. Giraffes, in average, that in nature that gets caught by lions, by normal African lions, you typically get to a situation where it's mostly young giraffes or calves being caught. But yeah, if you get prides of lions being big enough, it gets to a point that they could bring down even adult giraffe. But there's a bit of a strategy happening on that hunting technique there. It gets to a point that they sometimes chase them off into rough surfaces or unstable surfaces, if you can put it that way. So it comes down to a situation that they literally chase them out, like say for instance over a rocky surface, the animal will trip and fall, because a giraffe off its feet gets to a point that they could literally trip and fall, and then it's unstable ground for him. To get up quick enough is going to be quite a bit of a battling situation for him. And then that's where the lions will gain on power. Some more spotted hyena tracks coming through. Beautiful Namakwa doves coming through.
When on safari, there's nothing better than an evening spent under the stars chatting around a fire, with the sounds of the wild all around you. If you sign up to be a WildEarth explorer, you can build your own memories by joining our guides for regular fireside chats. Subscription payments can be made by PayPal, credit card, and now bank transfer. WildEarth Explorers, it's in your nature.
Converging game path will invariably lead you to a water source, but treat all water as suspect. One of my favorite ways of purifying water is to filter out the particulates. And by just filtering it through your sock, you can clear out most of those. You can put water into a snail shell and you can boil it over a fire or using a chemical like chlorine or colloidal silver.
My name is Steve, and one of my favorite things at WildEarth is getting questions from you. The type of questions that I really like are those ones that really help us to unpack and understand and really integrate the ecological knowledge and fully appreciate the importance that animals such as these Cape buffalo bring to the ecosystem. If you want to ask a question on WildEarth, you're going to have to register on the website, but once registered, just head on over to the live safari page and enter your question under the live feed.
The croc is still holding another one there. It's holding from the hindquarters. I would really want the wildebeest cross. Is it trying? The croc is holding the tail. It's holding tight. Oh no. Goodness me. Lucky wildebeest. You have another day to leave.
Expect the unexpected here on WildEarth Daily.
Hi, I'm Kyle, and I come to you live every day here from Tswalu Kalahari in South Africa. My favorite animal in the Kalahari has to be the aardvark. Its unique appearance, its ethology, and as well as ecology within this vast ecosystem is amazing, and something that I have been really lucky to experience on foot here at Tswalu.
Catch up with the guides daily here on WildEarth.
So welcome back to Tswalu Kalahari. Is something quite interesting that we've been finding here actually. So just about a few minutes ago we found that wildebeest marking its territory. What I wanted to do is just showing you guys what it actually looks like, the particular sites that they actually make use of to mark the pre-orbital glands, specifically on a tree like this. So as you can see, there's quite a stained situation on the tree here. And so what they particularly do is, as you can see on this little bark section over here, I don't know if you can see that, Morgan. So they strip the bark of their horns, typically sometimes off, to get to the cambium layer of the tree. And the cambium layer is the moisture transport layer of the tree itself. So how it works, this particular tree, first things first, is the Boscia albitranca, which is also the other mother plant of this environment. And it sucks, this particular tree is one of those trees that sucks a lot of moisture from the surfaces up into the tree itself, and that cambium layer, as I was saying, would then transport the water to the twigs and the rest of the leaves and everything in the tops of the tree. So why do they want to go to that cambium layer? Because it's such a good moisture layer of the tree. It acts like a sponge. When that pre-orbital gland comes and he rubs it off onto that particular patch, specifically is what they're aiming for. So those messages that I was talking about earlier is what they're looking for, and to actually gain on a long-lasting message based on a bacterial structure, and then it gets to a point that they will then communicate with the wildebeest females coming through this area specifically in that way. But this picture becomes even bigger and much broader. So what happens is, typically as the wildebeest is a selective grazer, it means that he specifically chooses an area that is fantastically good for sweetgrass species specifically. Sometimes you could get the odd year where there's sour grasses coming through an area like that, but what happens specifically in a situation like this is, if he's invested in this area, it comes down to a situation that he's saying for years and years to come he's invested to stay there. And so the longer he can prove himself to be in an area like this to the females, So year in and year out, 5 years down the line, saying to females in the area, listen, I've survived wild dog packs coming through, haven't killed me. I've survived challenges from other males, haven't killed me. So the longer he can do stuff like that, gets to a point that he then proves himself and he becomes the mating preference of those females. So the more female herds comes through and notices that, it gets to a point that they keep on reading his good messages where he's saying to them, good food is in that area today, I will be in that area today, this is where you're going to find me, this is what it is. So what happens then is that it gets to a point that good communication levels happens in the bush quite often. So we're going to link you to elephants in Phinda.
We were actually sitting and watching some giraffe here off to our right, and then we just heard a snap, and I thought by myself, that sounds a little bit louder than what the giraffe usually feed. And then just saw this elephant bull. Look what he's doing there. He's trying to chew off the bark off of that branch there. We actually saw him break the whole branch off. Look how he's trying to twist and turn it in his mouth. See how he's chewed the bark off the left hand side there. And he's now just moving it through his mouth, getting to that cambium layer, which is the inner bark of that tree where a lot of the nutrients are stored. Trying to twist and turn it a little bit. Very interesting tusks that this elephant bull has, with that one growing almost upwards and the other one a little bit further down, possibly from an old injury, or could just be the way that the tusks are growing. Let's see if he goes for another branch. There we go. Snaps it off with such ease. I don't know if you can see what he's doing there, but he's essentially breaking the branch into smaller pieces when it's down on the ground there. See, it's not as big as it was when it was up in the tree there. Have a look at the leaves, you'll see how he's actually turning it in his mouth, grinding away the bark. See how he's just chewing it and moving it from side to side in his mouth. Seems like he's dropped that little piece there. Let's see if he picks another piece up. Otherwise, he might try and get another branch. Let me see if I can just see what type of tree that is. I think it might be a red ivory tree. Indeed looks like it. Oh, he's got that branch in his mouth again. Incredible how quickly he can take that bark off. And how nimble that trunk is to be able to maneuver it in his mouth there. It seems like he's dropped it now. There we go, for another one. Nope, decided that branch is not the one for him. He's gone back to the one that he had on the ground there. Maybe he spotted another piece of bark that he didn't just get to. Oh, look how he breaks it inside his mouth. You can imagine how strong his bite must be for him to hold that branch and just snap the little branch like a twig. Seems like he's got a limp or something when he was walking there. See how his head is swaying from side to side. Lauren, you're asking whether or not he'll eat only the bark or everything. So I've seen red ivories, that particular tree, they actually do eat the leaves as well. But I guess this bull is just in the mood for some bark today. Not anything else. He's actually coming this way a little bit. It does look like he's limping. Have a look at how he's walking. You can see his head. Every time he steps with his right and front leg, he moves a little bit. Might want to keep our distance a little bit from him. Let's see where he goes. He's still a good distance away from us. Okay, he is turning towards us. I'm just going to move back and give him his space, especially with him having a bit of what seems like an injury. He's going towards those giraffe now. I think let's just watch him from here. He was still a good 50 meters or so away from us, but just because he's got that limp, you never know with elephants. The fact that he was walking with his ears out towards us. Yeah, look at that. See that right front leg of his when he steps? His head just dips a little bit. Let's see, there's another red ivory tree just to the left-hand side of him. Let's see if he goes to that one there. Yeah, he is turning to it already. Lisa, you're asking if there's more, whether or not there's more nutrients in the cambium layer of trees than in grass. I would assume so. The amount of grass that you would have to eat, that this elephant would have to eat to be able to get the same amount of nutrients that's in the cambium layer of a tree, I think is quite substantial. So it might be a little bit more difficult to feed on the cambium layer for this elephant bull, but I think it's definitely more nutritious for it to feed on on that than trying to feed loads and loads of grass. So that's probably why it's doing that. See how he's just smelling the ground a little bit. He did out of a bit of a slip earlier, like when he was just stepping. He looks like he might be in a little bit of pain. He's smelling the ground there. Saw some dung of what looked like a herd of elephants come through the area earlier. So I don't know if he's just slowly following the herd or so. Maybe that's where he got his injury, maybe from a different bull or so, fighting with him. Yeah, the fact that he stopped there and smelt the ground and then turned directly to his left-hand side, directly north, probably means that he's on the scent of some other elephants. So you can see him swaying from side to side, smelling with his trunk on the ground there. He's about to disappear down into the valley. I do think that this injury from this elephant bull, I didn't see any swelling or anything like that on his foot. It might just be like a stick or something that's stuck, in which case it'll swear out very easily. And I'm sure he'll be fine. He is moving and being able to feed, and at least he can walk still. So I think he should be fine. There's some giraffe here on the right-hand side of us, just left of the elephant. He's now disappeared into the valley there. So let's have a look at these giraffes. They are the ones that we stopped for at first, and then we just heard the snap of the branch as that elephant bull was feeding. See that one just standing and looking this way. It's just chewing the cud. Atul, you're asking if elephants and giraffes suffer from arthritis. I'm actually not sure at all. I'm not sure if that is just a human disease. I'll have to find that out for you. I'm actually not sure at all. I'm sure they can get some kind of probably some infection in their joints, maybe from injuries or something like that. But I don't know if full-blown arthritis is something that they get. I guess arthritis is like a joint injury of sorts. So I would assume that some animals can get it, especially later in their lives. This elephant bull was not as old, so I wouldn't say it's like in the later period of its life. So I doubt it is that. There's a giraffe here off to the left-hand side, and it's actually standing next to one of those red ivory trees, and it's feeding on the leaves. So these red ivory trees, they actually bear some berries. And I think it's about around December or so, and they are delicious little berries. But for now, there's no berries at the moment, so they've all fallen off and have become overripe. So these giraffes are just enjoying the leaves. Oh, looks like it's a relatively young bull, this giraffe. You can see how nice and thick the horns are, and quite wide apart from each other. Charles, you're asking how giraffe communicate with each other. Charles, so I'm sure a lot of it is to do with some body language, but you make a little bit of sound. They, against popular belief, they actually have a variety of sounds they make. But often I think it is body language. See, this bull's now got his head straight into the tree there, but now he's feeding on a different tree. So the tree on the left-hand side was a red ivory, and that looks what seems to be a buffalo thorn tree, which has actually got some straight thorns and hook thorns on it. So interesting that this giraffe's just feeding on it. You can see how just moving its head and tongue and lips very carefully in between the thorns there. But that skin around the lips and mouth is so thick that the thorns doesn't affect them as much. I haven't heard any breaking of branches or anything like that since that elephant has left us. So I think that elephant bull has probably kept on walking towards the rest of the herd that we had earlier. You can see this giraffe has got his head almost in the middle of the tree there. So getting to the spots where other animals can't necessarily get. If you have a look at that, the buffalo thorn there, you can actually see the little twigs on the sides and at the top of the tree that has been browsed off by all the other giraffes probably coming through the area. So it just shows you how they don't feed on the twigs like other animals like elephants would, but they just eating all the leaves off of the little twigs. And the giraffe's really trying to get himself right into the middle there to the leaves that don't get browsed on by other animals, it seems. It is such a relaxing time of the day. It's like just about 7 o'clock, and the reason why it looks so cool and it's not this, there's no harsh sun shining on us. There's a massive storm building behind us. It's nice and cool, and these giraffes are obviously enjoying the cool weather, feeding as much as they can before the rain comes later on. Let's see if we can move a little bit forward and get a bit closer to these giraffes here. I'm going to see if I can stop just here next to them. We are on one of the main roads that goes through Phinda, so just giving some space for some other vehicles to also get past us. And we might get a better view of this giraffe's mouth and everything as he's feeding. Just excuse the vehicles coming past on their way to do some reserve work. Really trying to get right into the middle of that tree there. The giraffes can obviously reach the spots where other browsing animals can't. Look at his bald patches of callousized skin forming on top of his horns. As this bull gets older, those bald spots will just get bigger and bigger, almost like in humans. But from fighting, when they swing their necks, I'm so sure you've heard of it before, where they swing their necks and hit with the back of those horns. And that's why those horns are nice and thick like that. Jonathan, you're asking whether or not the black part of the tail, the long hairy part, is soft or not. Giraffe have relatively thick hair, so I wouldn't say it's soft. And the hair shouldn't be too soft, because then it will be difficult for them to swat flies away. So it's relatively hard compared to the rest of the fur on the giraffe. So when it brings the tail over like that, can you see that it doesn't just bend easily, it actually stays fairly straight. So actually quite rough hair. Tovo, you are asking whether or not giraffe lie down to sleep or stand up. So I think in different areas maybe it's a little bit different depending on the vegetation or so. But here on Phinda we've seen that giraffes sometimes move to open clearings at night and they actually can lie down. In a big herd like this, there's actually quite a few of them around here. Might find that there's one or two that they're standing up and feeding and keeping an eye out at night while the rest actually lies down. So they'll lie down on their haunches and almost tuck their head in behind their shoulder like a bird would tuck its head in behind its wing. And then they'll give each other turns to keep an eye out. Oh, look at this giraffe's now reaching to the upper parts of the tree there. This young bull can maybe get a little bit bigger than what he is at the moment. Maybe a little bit taller, then he will be able to reach the very, very, very top of the leaves on this tree. Just gonna let another vehicle pass here quickly. Lisa, are you asking whether or not the animal's coats get thicker when it gets colder? Because the African temperatures don't soar as much, it stays relatively the same, especially in this part of South Africa. The animals don't really have winter coats and summer coats. I suppose something like a baby zebras, sometimes they've got nice and fluffy coats on them because they are born throughout the whole year, so you might find that they have a bit of a winter coat when they're born just to protect them from the cold in case they do get born in the winter. But generally the coats of the animals stay the same throughout the year. But while these giraffes are feeding and just sticking around here, I think we are going to see if we can get a little bit closer to the lodge and see if we can go and have a look at that herd of buffalo. Hopefully they've moved into a spot where there's a bit of better view of them or so.
Hi, I'm Sue. I'm from South Africa and I'm the incredibly lucky winner of the Tswalu competition. Tswalu has so much to offer, but we're really looking forward to the game viewing options, as going out with a personal guide who has so much knowledge will just be exceptional. Motsi Lodge looks absolutely amazing, and we're so looking forward to spending time there. It really is out of this world. I only registered as an explorer towards the end of January, so when the email arrived stating that I was the winner, it took me totally by surprise. I'd just like to thank WildEarth and Tswalu for this most incredible prize. It really is a dream come true.
WildEarth Explorers, it's in your nature.
Being a safari driver requires some serious multitasking ability. You've got to be able to talk, look at the road, steer, and occasionally get the vehicle into the right gear.
Do not crash into any trees. Oh, that's a dozy.
Just jump into the car and hope for the best, and you'll see where it takes you. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm surprised they're moving as fast as that didn't go well.
Who is the best driver? Well, me, of course, although some of the cam-ops might disagree. Hi, my name is Tristan Dix, and I am a guide here at Djuma Private Game Reserve for WildEarth. We love connecting you to the African bush, and we always look forward to all of your questions. If you want to ask a question on WildEarth, you'll need to register on the website. Once registered, go to our live safari page and submit a question below the live feed. Catch up with me on WildEarth. Hello, Mama. Just checking us out, everybody. There's no aggression here. Very relaxed. A herd of elephants moving around your car like that. It's truly, truly magical.
Tune into WildEarth every single day. It's in your nature.
So, welcome back to Tswalu Kalahari. There's a fantastic combination happening here in this concept. We've seen an oryx, but with a few nests happening here as well. Looking at the oryx itself, it's actually quite interesting seeing it in this particular savanna environment in quite an open area. As it is in the Kalahari, as Deirdre was saying as well on Drive yesterday, talking about how the Kalahari is not the Kalahari without an oryx. But specifically looking at this area itself, the sands of the Kalahari is... it's fine, yeah, no. So the sands of the Kalahari is quite hot, specifically with the amount of minerals that we have in the soils out here. So specifically looking at the minerals itself, we got quite a bit of hematites, feldspar, but also quartzite in this particular the minerals that's from the barren rock material in this particular environment. So having to see that minerals present, it attracts a lot of sharp sunlight. So you get to summer's days, again coming back to temperatures of 45, 48 degrees Celsius in the hottest days of summer. You typically get to a situation where temperature if I can put it through a flight reading system, if I can put it that way, you typically get temperature in easily up to about 48, and temperature out can push it up to about 60 degrees Celsius, bouncing up from the soils and so on. So typically animals in the Kalahari has got a lot of adaptations to survive out here. So if you look at the belly of this oryx, it's a pity it's so far that we're looking at this animal, but yeah, looking at this animal, you can see quite well from seeing oryx before, there's very pronounced white bellies and so on. Even if you look at the springbuck itself, so these white bellies that they have can reflect that sharp light that reflects from the ground back into the ground again as it is. But more so, if you look at this oryx's face, the oryx has got a beautiful, lots of white markings in the face itself as well to reflect the light out of its face as well, keeping quite a lot of sharp intensity out of the face. Now, typically they've got these adaptations thinking about the environment as it is in a situation of being able to survive. But as Morgan is going to pan over to the nest, thinking about an oryx being able to survive like that, I want to touch a bit more on the subject of these particular nests that you're looking at here. So these are white-browed sparrow weaver's nests. Now we've got a research division through the Tswalu Foundation basically that does a lot of research work on the reserve itself. And this particular nesting structure from the white-browed sparrow weavers have taught us so much more about this ecosystem itself. And so thinking about how this particularly works. Now, the white-browed sparrow weavers, thinking about what we've just learned from that particular oryx, a lot of animals in the Kalahari goes through a lot of adaptations and quick adjustments, basically through changes in nature. So how these, to get to that specifically, you're looking at these nests being two different types of functional nests that you're looking at, where you got a false nest, typically where you got two sides hanging down, and then you got a true nest, generally at the back of the tree or the tree next door, as it is. So you've got a hierarchy system where you've got an alpha pair and a beta pair, and the rest is acted like a supportive unit structured system, as it is. And so it happens where your alpha pair will then sit in a true nest where it's hidden behind the tree. So typically this time of the year you could get snakes like Cape Cobra, boomslang, and those particular snakes that will follow the birds up into the tree. This bird will make like a broken wing display, and then so it gets to a point that as the snake then follows the bird up into the tree, it will then hop into this particular false nest where it will literally sit inside and wait. The snake will then follow, but this is one of those situations where you will literally can't see from the outside in, but only from the inside out. So the bird will literally wait for that snake to pop in his head. Until that last moment, the bird will pop out and literally fly off for about 30 to 40 meters away from the actual site. But by the time the snake has gone in and he's just thought, what has just happened? Where has this bird just gone to? It gets to a point that the snake will then leave the nest and spot the bird literally and off in a distance. It then keeps on following it away from the nest. And so the bird, being a supportive unit structure, have then reached the point of protecting the true nest, where it's basically come to a situation where they've protected their alpha pair. So the alpha pair is literally in this situation means a lot to them, because if you want to lead, you lead us to success, and that is indeed what they're getting up to. So, and also a strong supportive unit being able to support their leaders and actually obey whatever they're leading them into is very important. As I said before, it is very important in the Kalahari to have that teamwork, family unit structure happening. So yeah, quite cool. I mean, it could have been just a cool nesting structure, but also quite rough if you look at it, the way they built and constructed it together. But in the bigger picture of all things, it's actually quite interesting thinking about how it works, understanding the ecosystem better by just looking at the oryx and taking it over to a bird's nest, thinking about this combination of the bigger story of this ecosystem. A lot of things in this ecosystem works exactly like that. We'll have, looking at the meerkats, you're looking at the African wild dogs, you're looking at the Damara mole rats. Now the Damara mole rats specifically is also working through that particular concept of that hierarchy system, as it is. But yeah, pretty cool. It's quite interesting to understand. First things first, you got to understand the ecosystem that you're in to understand the bigger ways of interrelationships and interactions, how an ecosystem comes together. Cool. Let's continue driving down the road and see what we get furthermore. So quite interesting, when we drove on the other side of this block earlier, when you guys were on Phinda, we spotted some jackal off in a distance. Now typically in the Kalahari, as we spoke about just now about the nest itself, we often get jackals, and even the brown hyena every now and again follows, but more so over the jackals as opposed to hyenas. You would get like quite a lot of them following cheetahs and specifically wild dogs in this particular environment. Now, the eastern side of the country, specifically Krugerpaat, and looking at the KZN, KwaZulu-Natal's reserves and so on, you typically get to a situation where you get leopard country on that side, whereas this is more wild dog and cheetah country. And because wild dog and cheetah is such successful hunters, especially in the dune plains and the savanna environments of this particular area, you could easily get to a situation. Oh, look at that beautiful, beautiful southern pale chanting goshawk. Quite a common raptor in this area. Now check how he flies right over one of the meerkat burrows of this area. We are quite close by to one of the burrow systems of the Gosse group of meerkats. Look at him coming across. So you can see him actually flying over the top end of the mountain there. Beautiful view. Gorgeous. So pale-chanting goshawks actually all over the Northern Cape Province. You get them from here all the way through into the Karoo ecosystem, which is very similar to this. But anyways, coming back to the cheetah and the wild dogs, I mean, wild dogs are literally the top killer, top hunter in Africa as it is, and thinking about the jackals being clever enough knowing that, okay, you know what, this is actually what needs to be done to follow. It's almost like they follow them in advance in the situation of knowing there's a huge benefit up ahead if they get to a point where those dogs or cheetahs have taken down a potential prey. So as we talking about that, thinking about the area we're nearing and approaching, I saw those jackals in a long distance from the road down further away, that they were coming towards this area here. So we just keeping a good lookout for them. Sometimes they're a dead giveaway if there's quite a lot of them in this particular area and region. Now, just something else that I've just spotted here now. On the left-hand side there, Morgan, is a kudu bull lying down. I don't know if you can see it there, Morgan. Can you just pan out to that side a bit? Shall I pull a bit forward there for you? Yeah. All right, so it's a bit far there, actually. We're a bit further of a distance away happening there. But yeah, anyways, I don't know if you guys have all seen that kudu there, that kudu male. As you can see, the wind direction's coming from the southern end, and he's on the northern end of that bush lying down. And this is coming back to what we spoke about earlier on, thinking about how animals are adapting, trying to make use or gain senses in this particular situation. So animals will be a bit more itchy on the edge and wanting to do things like that kudu male. So our cheetah might be doing the same thing as well, where they might be lying down, relaxing, well, more of the sense of trying to get to a relaxed mode, trying to get to a relaxed mode behind a bush where they break away from the wind a bit. We're going to link you to Phinda, to a couple of buffalo.
We've just come across that herd of buffalo that we were talking about earlier. And there's quite a lot of them. They're very playful, a lot of the youngsters. Oh, there's a big bull coming off from the right-hand side there now. Might cross the road here in front of us. Can feel a few drops starting to drip here on us. These buffaloes seem a little bit nervous. Sure, this bull just turned around and was looking to the right-hand side here. And running to the rest of the herd. I don't know if you can see, but he's got a bit of red stuff on his horns there. That's from rubbing his horns against a tree or so and getting that bark onto his horns, and maybe a bit of dirt or so. Trying to scratch around those horns. Imagine where all the ticks and everything goes and sit in the little crevices. Must be very itchy around there. This herd of buffalo is coming onto like a little bit of an open grassland there on the left hand side, coming for the nice lush green grass that's growing here, but there's a watering hole not far away from here. Oh, female chasing another one away from her calf there. Feel it's starting to drizzle now as the storm rolls in from the east. Karen, you're saying these buffalo always look so unimpressed, though they don't really have expression on their faces. See how they're all like moving away from us now down into the open grassland, all with their heads down, feeding as much as they possibly can. But while these buffalo are moving on, we are going to see what else we can find.
So welcome back. We're going to just continue driving up towards this northern end of this dune. We're going to see if we can possibly get these cats coming up to. We're still looking for those cheetah. They have crossed into the block on our right hand side, and so we're waiting to see if the tracks are coming across towards this side. Out of the block, we've had a bit more jackal activity. I see some more tracks coming across on the road here. So typically, as I said earlier on, cheetahs would eventually, even in this wind, every now and again go to the tops of the dunes, just scout quickly over the area because the wind is blowing so much. Scouting for safety purposes, looking over the certain area and see if it's safe enough to progress into that area, keep on going. But I think it's going to be a bit more of a quieter morning for everybody on the wind's point of view because of that stress factor happening quite a bit for most animals. But on the other hand, it's a gorgeous morning in Africa. Turning into the wind a bit, yeah? Having quite a bit of rain at the other destinations, so we're going to be with us for quite a while. So there will be times that we specifically more looking for some tracks as we're concentrating in this particular area for these cheetah, hoping to see them on the edge of a bush here somewhere. Because I'm thinking they're definitely going to do what that kudu male was doing. But yeah, we're going to be with Tswalu for a bit. You're welcome to also send through some more questions on #WildEarth at FC. Put the FC in front of your question. You're welcome to ask us some more questions. Look at that gorgeous view. As far as the eye can see, it's this game reserve literally just stretching out to never-ending limits. That is just so beautiful. So I just want to scan over this area a tiny bit more. I see there's some more oryx actually just lying down. Now it's very uncommon for this time of the morning to have animals already lying down. Now this is typically just coming back to animals just trying to take cover, good enough cover for safety purposes as it is, as I've mentioned before. But yeah, you can see the dune fields stretching out quite nicely, and typically in this cheetah environment that we're literally looking at, it's a fantastic area for them. So just scouting a bit more, see some more kudu down below in the dune street, which will drive down that way just a bit further, having a bit of him. Paul, you just asked if animals do get struck by lightning sometimes in the Kalahari. You know what? I don't think it's impossible. I do think it's happened. Well, about 4 years ago, I've had a situation where a couple of sable has been struck by lightning before on a dune crests further to the north of the reserve. We've had a situation where a giraffe has been struck in a valley, actually, thinking about it. And funny enough, it wasn't on a dune top. But yeah, I mean, it gets to a point that it's not impossible. Definitely yes, but it's not happening often though. So it's not like it's happening with every thunderstorm as it is. But yeah, it's not impossible. Definitely. Sure, this wind is coming through the dune streets quite strongly actually. Walter, you just asked what is it about the soil that gives it that beautiful red color. So the thing is, because the parent rock material in the mountains specifically now, first of all, in this area of the Kalahari, it's one of the few areas in the whole ecosystem. Obviously, it stretches from this northwestern corner of South Africa, stretching over mainly over Botswana, and then it leans over into Namibia on the southern end where it touches the boundaries of the rocky desert up north in Namibia, called obviously in Afrikaans it's more called Damaraland, and or Demoraland. But bottom line is basically the rest of the Kalahari over the Botswanan border is quite white in color, and it's because of different minerals it comes through, or lighter colored source. But in this area, it's the only area in the Kalahari where there's mountains, one of the few areas in the Kalahari. So thinking about it, the parent rock material in these mountains are quartz and quartzite. So that itself in some areas are quite a reddish, it's quite a reddish type of rock type, but you're looking at a mineral, in a specific mineral that's high in amounts of presence in that particular rock type, that is literally weathered down into the soils, and that particular rock mineral is called hematite. So the description of that hematite mineral is literally called boiling red blood, and that is basically, on top of that you got a bit of iron oxides that comes in together with that, and then a bit more iron minerals that comes in. So, but the main thing is that hematite and a bit of combination of everything coming in together with that all, and that is what makes the green Kalahari, which is this southern end of the Kalahari, a bit more reddish in color specifically. Now the green Kalahari name comes from our rainfall being a bit more present or higher in this particular region of the Kalahari, and so it comes down to that situation that you get a bit more animal life in this area as well of the Kalahari. So there's another Wildebeest territorial male that was on our right hand side here. So we're going to send you back to Phinda with some Warthog.
To drive along the road that is actually going towards Mountain Lodge on Phinda, and we've come across a family of warthogs and a big Ngala bull as well, and there's a little piglet in between the warthogs there. The lush green moss, what looks like some herbs and forbs growing here. can see the piglet here closest to us. And have a look at that Ngala bull that's in the back there. It's got a lot of mud on its horns. So this bull has gone and stood at a spot where there's a bit of muddy swell or so, and then pushed his horns into the mud, displaying dominance. There's two warthogs that's sparring a little bit here closer to us as well. Grooming each other, rubbing their heads against each other. Starting to drizzle here now. Very fine rain starting to fall. Look at these two warthogs just pushing and shoving each other around. They've had enough now. Right, so while these warthogs are keeping on feeding, and they're next to a road here, there's a bit of rain coming down, so I think we're going to move on and see what else is out there.
It's no secret that nature can heal. Some of our WildEarth viewers are finding solace in the outdoors close to their homes during lockdown.
This is how I keep myself busy during lockdown. Beautiful little jumping spot.
I love walking in the open spaces near my home. Provides a moment of peace in a crazy world.
This is my fire escape with some of the birds I get to see. That's what it's like in New York City during lockdown.
Being in nature helps me to cope with the challenges of life and helps me to be humble and grateful.
It's magical watching everything turn into a winter wonderland as the snow softly falls.
Been doing lots of walking, dog walking, outside at parks.
This is my Ridgeback Drake. Our little slice of paradise is a provincial park called Hopewell Ross.
Connecting with nature is critical to stay positive during these tough times. WildEarth encourages you all to find time to escape to nature.
Sometimes love wants to make you sing. And sometimes love wants to make you bow and fan your wings to your bow. For the southern yellow-billed hornbill, these are signs that love is in the air. These birds are destined for a season of monogamy at least. Breeding pairs are in it for the survival of their chicks. But before love commences, the male needs to woo his valentine with food in the form of nuptial gifts.
I'm Nikki here at andBeyond in Ngala in South Africa. I love getting questions from viewers about all the small things within the environment and how it all is integrated with one another. If you want to ask me any questions, please simply register with the WildEarth website, head across to the Live Safari page and then post your questions there. I'm looking forward to chatting to you on my next WildEarth drive.
Something very, very interesting. I didn't plan this, but this is a scene rarely seen. This is what we call a journey of giraffe. So beautiful.
Tune into WildEarth every single day. It's in your nature.
Welcome back to Tswalu. So we have literally just found a camel thorn tree that nearly almost took out our eye. It's crazy. There's some pretty hectic thorns actually on this particular tree. Now, just talking about trees in the Kalahari in general specifically, it's quite interesting because it's a desert. It's a tough environment as it is. So you're literally looking at an environment that animals and plants need to survive, specifically having adaptations as it is. So you're looking at these thorns that, as I was mentioning, this is quite sharp and straight, hectic thorns looking at you. But yeah, because this is one of the mother plants that we were talking about this morning as well, it is a high in nutritional valued plant. So this particular plant gets fed on quite a lot. So that is the reason for having this particular thorns and so. But right in the beginning of the year, talking about something completely different and being a mother plant and the functions of a mother plant, is that right in the beginning of the year, January, February, you typically get this camel thorn tree with bright, beautiful yellow flowers all over the show, specifically on the twigs that you can see coming out in certain areas, and the nodes and the internodes. And then that is what animals like giraffes and kudu, and typically some of your mixed feeders like eland could feed on that, as the plant is providing that for the Kalahari that time of the year. As we get to this time of the year, getting closer to March, those yellow flowers are disappearing, but some of the seed pods will be coming out then, as Morgan is focusing there on them. You can see them actually a bit better. The seed pods will then come out, but these seed pods will literally be extremely distasteful this time of year because of that lime green color that comes out on some of them, and that is a high amount of cyanide presence in that seed pods as it is. So animals that truly belongs to the Kalahari would know, okay, they shouldn't and must not touch that seed pod. Now, what is the reasoning behind that? Because the food resource for this time of the year going over to the month of May will be the leaves of this particular tree, because then that is where they get their moisture buildup and levels from for this particular time of the year. Now, when are the seed pods then coming in use? You're typically looking at winter months. So winter months, I know there was a question about a few days ago about what is the protein levels like in grasses? Now, typically coming back to that question, you're looking at this particular plant, the seed pods of this particular tree for winter months is basically about 18 to 19, almost 20% of protein levels basically in amounts that would be present within the seed pods for that time of the year. So in the winter time in the Kalahari, you get to a point that it gets extremely cold, and to keep warm, you need a huge amount of energy buildup. So where comes energy from? Mostly from protein. So the seed pods will automatically lose the cyanide presence, and it turns grey, and that's when your Kalahari animals will start consuming it. The seed pods will then even fall off the tree, and animals like kudu would pick it up from the ground and eat it, literally like candy from a candy store on the bottom of the ground. And then the process will repeat itself towards spring, where the yellow flowers will come out, and it'll do the same thing towards the end of the year, as it will then provide different food resources right throughout the year. Now, it's quite interesting when you think about things like that happening, how this ecosystem comes together. We spoke about the oryx and the nest of the white-browed sparrow weavers this morning. Just thinking about how everything comes together. It is quite cool to think about an ecosystem being so successfully cooperating different times of the year, actually. And we can take a drive around further through the dunes and so on, and see what we can see on other plants specifically as well, that will tell us a bigger story of this particular environment as well. And yeah, because it seems like the animals are hiding a bit this morning from this wind, quite a bit. But yeah, let's continue down the road and see what else we can find. Another gorgeous, spectacular view of the green Kalahari and this dune streets coming up. But that was a very young camel thorn tree, obviously, that we've looked at, but that one literally just nearly took out our eyes when we came past there. It was a bit of a hectic thorn. It was on the top end there. Some of them coming through on the top edge here as well. So Cinnamon, you're commenting that you can't believe the diversity on Tswalu. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a saying in the bush that says the men in white coat says this or that, and this is what it's all about. The men in white coat says it's one of the best ecosystems in the world due to the quick adaptations and typically just plants and animals just literally adapting to the climatic changes and conditions, and then within that as a diversity, constant changes happening, animals adapting to change in the bigger picture. It is massive, it's incredible. So yes, there's so many things that happens throughout the different seasons, basically with animals and plants going through different changes in order to survive as well. It is a very interesting nesting structure that just happened. There was a female southernmost weaver that just flew out from the nests from the camel thorn tree here. Now, as we spoke about the mother plant providing life again, here we go. There's another example happening here. I don't know if you guys seen that bird flying out of there, but yeah, typically these are the southernmost weavers. Now, what happens is the male, interestingly enough, will build the nest. And this could take him up to about 5 to 6 days sometimes. I've watched a process like this before, which he keeps on flying up and down, working hard at it, just building this nest. He'll call the lady in and literally say, come and investigate, have a look and see what you think. And if she doesn't like it, she'll literally rip that entire thing apart and say, is this really what you think about me? Do I need to stay in something like this? And then he'd say, okay, well, if he's really keen to have this lady, he will continue building other nests and keep on building to win her favor. And it could even happen twice, to where she rips the nest apart in that situation. But yeah, eventually, if she likes it, then he'll literally take the lady, and then they'll invest in that home as it is. But yeah, cool examples of, as we spoke about, the sociable weaver's nests, specifically making use of the mother plant as well as the white-browed sparrow weavers. Now we're looking at a different species that is doing exactly the same thing. Now, why are they all doing it? It's because it's a strong tree that's providing life again as a mother plant. It's very important to understand the bigger picture in the Kalahari, thinking about how things cooperate and work together, and in order again to survive. Now, in a desert environment, Morgan, we're going to travel a bit further down the road. In a desert environment, it typically comes down to a situation where animals and plants rely on each other a lot, and it comes down to that specifically, that it needs to be done specifically thinking about the environment, conditions that changes over time, and knowing how to deal with it. Some beautiful, beautiful Cape turtle doves flying across. Jackie, you have just asked, have we noticed any new birds after the rain? Now, on screen we had about the last week, actually a couple of days, we had the Adaptations stork in flocks in high amounts that just came out, and eggs have been coming out all over the show of insects and things all over the show, but mostly the greater armored cricket that's been fed on by the Adaptations stork lately, but also water birds. We've had some African spoonbills lately that's been coming through, but mostly the common common windbrill, which is quite cool birds. Let me have a look here. To give you a bit of an example, let me just look up this bird. But yeah, to give you an example of a common windbrill in the waterhole in the east that I've found on the eastern side of the reserve. Just have a look here quickly. Yeah, so that's typically a water bird that you could get from time to time, but only if it's rained enough in that situation. So I don't know if you can see the bird over here specifically, but this is a very uncommon bird. Now this is actually a coastal bird that lives on the coastal belts. If you look at the distribution of it all coming through on the coastal section of South Africa, and then one little star quite close to where we are, that's typically where you could get the odd situation. So the last time I've seen this particular bird was about 4 years ago, roughly, when we had one flood of rain coming through about 4 years ago. And about 3 days ago, I've literally seen this particular bird again. So yeah, pretty cool actually looking at it. Very interesting actually. So if you look at the beak or the bill of this particular bird, you'll see it's like a longish recurved bill, and this is what is known as a prober feeder. On the edge of the bill itself, it's got sensory or sensors basically that they would put the bill under the water on the edges on the sand, and then it gets to a point that they would tap into the sand, into the water, and then pick up the vibrations. All the vibrations then disturbs the insect life underneath the water into the soil, and then it gets to a point that they can feel through sensory the movement, and then they would quickly grab the insect through that, and a longish tongue grabbing it underneath the surfaces and the soils and the water and so on. But yeah, very interesting. You don't get to see them a lot here though, but typically a good example. Looking at that particular bird, there's a few odd ones that we've been seeing in the west as well, like the red bishop here and there. But yeah, quite cool. Odd things happening every now and again. So. And that's purely just... Anna Marie, you are asking, do I have a favorite bird? Now, definitely one of my favorite birds in this particular area is actually a southern ant-eating chat. Because I'll tell you the reasoning behind it. It's not really because of beauty specifically, but also the behavior. It's mostly to do with the behavior as it is. And in an open area like this, in the dunes, if you look at the base edges of this particular area of these bushes, these bush clumps coming together, that's typically in the Kalahari. I don't know if you've noticed that we do not have the big termitorium or the big termite mounts that is around in this area. And so it's generally at the bases of these bushes and so on, you get the harvested termites. So we don't have the snouted harvesters. And typically in areas like this is where we come and look for aardvark and pangolin in this particular area. And so we joke with that particular bird that you asked the question about, the southern ant-eating chat, is that in winter months, they're a dead giveaway for those rare species like aardvark and pangolin, because it comes down to the situation that 5 or 6 or 7 of them would hop up and down from the grasses in the plants and the dunes, specifically close to these base edges of these bushes, where the aardvark will find their food resources. And then it gets to a point that they will then just follow the aardvark and pangolin around. Then if you sometimes see in an area where the grasses are too much, it comes down to a point that they are a dead giveaway to, okay, that animal's definitely there or whatever, because the aardvark would dig up the surface and leave in quite a lot of remains of a few termites and ants being present in that particular spot. And then it gets to a point that they could just gain in a form of commensalism through that symbiotic relationship, where it doesn't really affect the aardvark at all, but the ant-eating chat is benefiting from that. So yeah, very cool actually in an area like that you're asking a question like that. We had a few oryx far off in the distance, but it's a bit far for us to catch on the camera for now, but yeah. Gorgeous. And then on the other hand, I would say the African fish eagle. We get those like once in a blue moon in the mountains, especially where we got our springs running, especially now, like now, time like now, we've had all of this rain. I mean, we've had well over 600 millimeters of rain in this rainy season already. So I mean, that's like twice our annual rainfall. So it'll have automatically our springs in the mountains flowing very effectively, and that obviously will bring sometimes the odd occasional African fish eagle coming over. But yeah, I think I've seen like one in this part of the Green Kalahari once. But yeah, eagles are always very, very beautiful. There's something quite interesting happening here. I don't know if you've seen. Don't know if you've seen this particular mole rat mounts that is actually here, or these mounts that you might have seen before. The thing is, we spoke about the Damara mole rats earlier on, as it is. This is what their housing actually looked like, with these little, like can I say, diggings, well, dig-ups. So what you'll see is there's little tubes of chambers, and so the way they work is that their teeth is designed specifically for digging out these tunnels underground. And if you look at it, they're all in a row. Morgan, if you can zoom out a bit there again, you can see there is these mounts are all like sort of, it looks like they packed in a row as it is, and it's done in that order because it's like one chamber that runs in that particular structure underground. And so it is that there's also good moisture underground in that particular area as it fits part of the ways they live underground for soft soils to create better enough homes, if I can put it that way. But yeah, quite interesting on this these Damara mole rat homes. So in wintertime, over to early evenings, because it's so cold at night, sometimes you see them above ground, quite far out in the southwest of the reserve. And then you'll see them actually busy doing this digging up of creating these tunnels and chambers and so. Excuse me. But yeah, looking at this particular structure, it's quite interesting thinking about how things go about to survive in the ecosystem like this. They also work, like I said to you earlier on, in that hierarchy system of specifically having alpha male and a female, and the rest are a supportive unit structured system, helping each other out, or helping specifically their leaders to get to success for survival specifically. But yeah, pretty interesting formation on the ground that we're looking at there. You have just asked, is Tswalu very different from Botswana Kalahari specifically? Annie, you know what? There are a few things that's similar to the Botswana and Kalahari specifically, but yeah, the thing is, the soil colors, the minerals, the vegetation, that is what makes it so different. Because the green Kalahari, meaning the southern Kalahari specifically, from that matter, is what makes it different, because the mountains being present in this section of the Kalahari creates a higher rainfall in this area, creates this beautiful green image. Now it doesn't say the central Kalahari desert over to Makgadikgadipans and those areas as well, that it won't get this green image, but it dries out so much quicker, because you see the thing what puts a differentiating structure between a desert and a semi-desert environment. Now this is a semi-desert environment. A semi-desert environment receives over 150 mils a year basically. A desert is claimed under 150 mils a year. And that is what creates the color so a bit different in that situation. And that is where the name came from for this particular ecosystem, specifically talking about the environment. This area is known as the Green Kalahari because of the rainfall and the presence of the mountains. So yes, there is quite a bit of a difference between the Green Kalahari and specifically the Central Kalahari. And that is what makes it so unique, because you literally get to a situation where it's a desert with 4 different ecotypes in this particular region. The crazy thing is, Tswalu is so big that it covers 4 different ecotypes, all 4 different ecotypes within this Green Kalahari ecosystem. And these ecotypes I'm talking about specifically is different ecoregions. Now, one of them that we are currently driving in is the dune fields. You get the thicket line in the far west, which is typically where lots more browsers are moving through, bigger mammals of browsers and so. And then you get the mountains, the valley sections in between. And then specifically you're looking at the woodland, semi-savanna woodland areas and so on. Eastern sections of the reserve are a bit different to the western sections as opposed to the northern sections and the southern sections as it is, but it's all due to those 4 different ecotypes that comes through. And so because you have these 4 different ecotypes on the reserve, well, specifically in the whole of the Green Kalahari's ecosystem, you get to a point that you get many different species. Coming back to what we said, what we spoke about earlier with the diversity in the Kalahari. Many different species of mammal life as well as bird life. And specifically talking about high-profile species like African wild dog, to cheetah, to the desert lions that you've been seeing before as well, and so there's many more. So, I mean, from the meerkats to aardvark to pangolin, it's brown hyena, aardwolf. These are all just animal species that occurs all in one spot. I mean, that was just a high-profile species, but as you've been looking at the last couple of months, looking at the general game that even occurs here, that is what makes such a huge difference in the Green Kalahari as opposed to the rest of the Kalahari, because there's more nutrient availability in this particular environment, and nutrients means life. There's a saying my granddad always used to say, or still saying to me, water brings life. And that it is and true indeed. I've just seen a very interesting plant here in this particular environment. Gonna have a look at this one. So we're seeing this plant on our right hand side here. Morgan, if you can zoom in just a tiny bit more on this particular plant. Now, what's quite interesting about this plant, it's quite in abundance in certain areas and so on, but specifically in the dunes. And the reasoning behind that is actually a pioneer plant. And this pioneer plant is known as a elandsbeen, or in Afrikaans, a elandsboontjie. And what this comes down to is it's this fern-like look that it is. It's actually quite dense. So this density to this particular plant comes to a situation that it catches the grass seeds and gathers grass seeds as well as other plants that is good for the environment in this particular area. Now, an animal that fed on sweet grass species in a certain area could have walked through here. It then defecates in a certain area. That dung will dry out and the seeds will blow over the area, and then the plant will catch the seeds as it is, and typically it'll reseed the area, if I can put it that way. Some of the environments on Tswalu, as it was old farmland in the past and so on, it gets to a point that it was sometimes quite disturbed, like overgrazing in certain areas. The good thing about Tswalu is today that it's quite an old reserve, so most of it has recovered quite nicely. But coming back to the plant itself, this particular plant is so high in tannin content that there is not much animals that actually touches it. So the animals that truly belongs in the Kalahari wouldn't really touch this plant at all, because they know it's so distasteful that there's no point in eating it. Again, we're coming back to a particular point that animals need to know, well, they know exactly when to use specific plants, why are they using it, because it's all coming back to energy levels that needs to be gained at the right time, the right place. But the plant then will be remaining untouched, and then it gets to a point, those seeds of those grasses and plants, that they fulfilled their function of catching it up into that particular spot, will then germinate, and then the grasses and the plants will come up there. And nature's so special in the Kalahari that it comes down to a situation that eventually, if those plants are flourishing again from the pioneer plant function, then it automatically, it will dry out and it becomes these little sticks. But then nature will be recovered in that particular situation. Year after year, you will still get this elandsbeen or elandsboentjie coming out in certain areas, but it's nature's way to recover. Now, often from a conservational point of view, the questions would come up, what do you do to recover a disturbed piece of land or whatsoever? The best thing of it all is, if you got such a nice piece of land, like Tswalu, for instance, I mean, we're literally talking about a landscape that is the size of small countries in the world, basically. But yeah, the nice thing is that there's enough land, and there's enough land to recover by itself. So you don't really want to interfere at all, because nature will, at the end of the day, take care of itself in that situation. But yeah, a very cool looking plant actually in this environment. Thinking about how successful this ecosystem is actually in doing what it needs to do, once again, to get to great survival and success. Cool, let's keep on driving down the road here, see what else we can see down here. Kelly, you've just asked why is it called elandsbeen. I'm just going to reverse back here quickly and I'll give you exactly why it's called elandsbeen. Just below here I've actually seen a seed pod. Morgan is just going to find it there for you quickly. And if you look right below this plant, you see right there at the bottom of the screen, basically, there's a little bean over there. Actually, my bad, it's not a little bean. It's a pretty rather large sized bean, actually. And that is basically the name for the plant comes from that particular bean, called elandsbeen or elandsboentjie. That's where it comes from. So quite cool. Excellent, the name of the plant. So this plant, coming back to that previous question on how different is the Kalahari in this, or the green Kalahari from the central Kalahari desert in Botswana, this particular plant you would find, for instance, in the central Kalahari as well, in the dunes, even close to the Kalahari Transfrontier Park. Animals are really trying to hide a bit this morning. This wind is just not slowing down. The clouds have cleared a tiny bit now, but I was kind of hoping that the wind would slow down along with the wind as the sun would come up a bit more, but yeah, it seems like the wind is going to stick with us a bit today. It doesn't say we're giving up. We're going to continue looking for some more mammals, see what we can find. folks, just to remind you as well, the other locations, other reserves that we doing this beautiful safari live from beautiful different places around South Africa. They're currently undergoing quite a bit of rain coming through, so we're going to be sticking a tiny bit longer with us in the Kalahari. And then also, if you're keen to ask some more questions, you're welcome to go ahead. Like I said previously, with regards to sending your questions to #WildEarth at FC in front of your question. Oh, so the sun has come up quite nicely. Roaming rhino, you've just asked what is the most frightening experience I've had in the wild. Well, roaming rhino, that's quite interesting. Sometimes you get to situations where there's quite a lot of times where you end up, especially on foot, with animals charging towards you, and specifically unexpectedly as you walk through some dense areas at some times or so, where you just don't have other options but to walk through that particular region. Look at that gorgeous, gorgeous landscape in front of us again. Yeah, so once I've had, I think it was like about 6 years ago when I started here, 7 years ago, I've walked with one of the trackers into a block where we literally were looking for lions, but this particular lion pride hasn't been seen for a good week or so. And so I remember we myself and the tracker discussed, listen, we're gonna try then follow the all set of tracks going into a certain set of block. And so we followed this tracks going into a block, and well, it was all tracks, so we had no other option because we didn't see the tracks coming out of the block. And we got to a point where we suddenly, on that set of tracks where we're following on foot, suddenly get fresh tracks all over the show for this particular pride. But it's tracks coming from any direction and going into any direction. So typically when you get to a situation like that, it means you're right on top of those lions, right there, right now. And I remember I grabbed the tracker's arm and I literally just looked at the situation around us. I said to him, I think these lions are literally in front of us, not too far away actually from us. And as I said it, I looked up and here's this lioness standing with a zebra carcass in her mouth and growling at us, thinking, but she was about, I don't know if you can see down the road, there's a dead tree down the road. And that dead tree, it's about that distance from us where she were. From us actually, and it got to a point where she was literally dropping the carcass and she charged us down for a good halfway that stint towards us. And now you're thinking, geez, okay, how are we going to stop this happening? The only thing is you could do in that situation, you're gonna have to just stand and hold your ground and literally just hope that she stops. And so she did, because I mean, on a carcass with lions on foot, it's a different story. We didn't know that that's what was going to be the case there. And so she then walked back to the carcass, and then the other lions popped up from all around her where they were lying down flat in the grass. And it's gotten to a point where she then got to the carcass, turned around, charged us at least 2 more times on foot in that particular section. And then myself and the tracker just kept on being standing still, because that's what you need to do in that situation. She eventually, when she backed off the 3rd time, we then had to evacuate the area, slowly backed off, and then she calmed down again. We came back in the vehicle, and then with the guests we viewed the sighting, and obviously where they were much more relaxed with the vehicle. So, but that, I must say, that was being the Kalahari lions and coming out of many different lodges worked before from that particular experience. And suddenly you get to work with Kalahari lions. They're just so much more intimidating looking in that situation. Yeah, I got to a situation where we literally got surprised so badly that I must say that was one of one of the eye-openers for me working on Tswalu for the first year or so. But eventually you get used to animals' aggression levels and that sort of thing. Yeah, so I mean it's incredible actually thinking about how things comes together in an environment. But at the end of the day, I mean I've been guiding about almost close to 10 years now, and you eventually get used to certain things in nature and just how to deal with it. There's nothing to be afraid of at the end of the day. Just respect being shown.
Do you dream of traveling to a far-flung wilderness location where life continues as normal? A place where you can escape to nature and breathe. If you become a WildEarth explorer, then this could soon become a reality. Subscribe today and stand a chance to win regular travel prizes. WildEarth Explorers, it's in your nature.
Riverbeds are a great way to find water and look for places where elephant have excavated hollows. You can then dig into the sand, and after a couple of feet you should find damp sand which then can be squeezed out or siphoned off for water. And with water being one of our scarcest resources, it is a good idea to conserve water where and how you can.
My name is Ross and I'm a field guide at andBeyond Phinda Private Game Reserve. I love getting questions from guests on WildEarth because I love sharing and learning information about nature with new people, and it also makes me feel like you're all joining me in real life. If you want to ask a question on WildEarth, then you need to register on our website. Once registered, go to our live safari page and submit your question below our live feed.
This is a battle of two great carnivores of the African wilderness. Whew. Whoa! You don't want to be under those jaws. Definitely, this round goes to the lion. Look at that. Fantastic.
Expect the unexpected here on WildEarth daily.
Hi, I'm Mike Anderson, and I come to you live every day from Eco Training Pridelands Conservancy in South Africa. The wild animal I think is most underrated. I think buffaloes are the most underrated. They're so tenacious and ferocious, and also very, very protective of each other, which I find incredible. You know, sometimes people think of the big five, they just think of lions and leopards and other big animals, but I think buffaloes are pretty underrated.
Catch up with the guides daily here on WildEarth.
Welcome back, guys. So if we look at that beautiful, beautiful flowers that we have on the ground here, this is something quite interesting that tells, well, it literally touches a bit of the history of this particular environment. Now, this particular plant is called a devil's thorn. And the reasoning behind that is because of this little seed pod thorns that they have, actually, that you can see here that I've got in my hand. And so what's quite interesting about this particular plant, and what's even more interesting about this, is the location of this particular area where this plant is situated at. Because the Kalahari Bushmen, coming back to the history of this environment, the Kalahari Bushmen made use a lot, well, basically, of the environment's plants and making use of the plants specifically, and elements of the environment to do with the area, to obviously live in this area and so on. So what I want to show you here with this particular devil's thorn is something they made use of by this plant is by plucking specifically the leaves of this plant like this, and then they kept it in their hand. And I'm going to pour a bit of water on this particular situation. I want to ask you actually to look at what's happening in my hands if I do this. So you can hear there's quite a bit of squeaking sounds coming out of there, but look at what's happening there. Do you see there's like a slimy formation that happens coming out there? Now, the other name that we, as locals, tried to call this is actually called a soap bush. Do you see it almost looks like, if you're South African, you would know about sunlight liquid, and it almost looks like that combination of sunlight liquid that comes out of there. Now, basically what I'm trying to say is you do not need hand sanitizer anywhere in the world. This is the best hand sanitizer of washing component that you can ever use of, actually. So then you can add a bit of water again on that as it is, and your hands will be cleaned. So quite interesting thinking about it, that there are so many different uses in a certain area, thinking about the bushman that was quite clever enough to find out these particular things. So, but yeah, that's the actual seed pod with the two little nipples of thorns coming out there, and then the leaves is what they made use of to wash their hands. Now, why am I specifically talking about that in an environment like this? Now, I don't see the other tree over here at the moment, but there's a tree in the environment always combined with this plant that's called a silver cluster leaf tree. And that silver cluster leaf tree they made use of specifically to hunt or make their hunting equipment from, specifically the camium layer of that particular tree. They stripped the bark, excuse me, and then they then strip the bark of that particular layer and then twist it to make like a little string, basically. And then there's a raisin bush, which is this one in front of us here that you're looking at. So the stronger, thicker stems of that particular bush, they made the bow, and the string of the silver cluster leaf tree on the top of the dune, also in the close proximity, was the string of the bow. So it's a bow and arrow being made in the area, and then typically the straight stems of the raisin bush itself, you would have gotten like a arrow typically been made out of this particular situation. So crazy thing is about this is that it's all in the same area, hunted in the same area. Obviously the bushmen, the men, were the ones that was doing all these tricks of the trade, if I can put it that way, and it's gotten to a point that they literally then hunted in a certain area, and then if they got to a carcass or whatsoever, they literally obviously had to wash their hands in a certain time. So then made use of a particular soap bush in that area and environment. But yeah, pretty cool actually as a combination, thinking about on a dune top like this, how things comes together. And so, but yeah, look at that beautiful clean hands we're looking at. Cool, let's continue driving further down the road. Excuse me. So Lisa, you just asked a question. How would you know that a plant is potentially poisonous? And it's good that you're saying poisonous, because it's not venomous. Venomous is generally when you get bitten by a snake or injected, typically in that situation. Ingested is the poison. But yeah, I guess it comes down to general knowledge of a certain environment. There are, with insects and typically with frogs, warning colors that you need to look at, specifically thinking about okay, this is a potential poisonous or specifically a poisonous thing to eat or whatever, so you shouldn't continue with that. But general knowledge is very important, and very, very important, specifically of an environment that you're in. So if you think about a situation where you're looking at an area, it's always good to familiarize yourself first with a certain given environment and get to know or sharpen up on your general knowledge. With plants, it is what it is. You got to just learn more. Do your study work at home. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Colors and coloration of plants with flowers, it will talk, well, it speaks up more about the environment, conditions, and so on. Colors of flowers. Like the color yellow if you got a color yellow on flowering plants specifically, like in abundance in a certain area, like you get some of the tribulus families in this particular environment, if it's covering like an entire area where it's almost the only plant in that area, it comes down to the situation that you literally can say, okay, well, that was disturbed. That is a disturbed area. So it's one of the pioneer plants also trying to recover the environment as it is from overgrazing, typically, just as an example, basically. When you get the color purples and whites and all of that coming into this area, it comes more to the situation of it says it's getting closer to sweet felt and moving away from a bad felt condition. So typically, if you look at this environment, it's in a really much better condition, if I can put it that way. Cool. Thanks for that question. Let's continue going on. So we're just gonna keep on going. But yeah, quite interesting thinking about how the Kalahari Bushmen that were travelers coming through this particular environment, traveling from areas to areas, utilizing certain elements for survival, just like the animals and plants are doing for a particular region like this. So if you think about the bigger picture, it's quite interesting that they never stayed for longer than a week to 2 weeks in a given area. Here's our yellow flowers that we were talking about. All over the show, some beautiful yellow flowers. Now these flowers that's coming up here is the small rattling pot. Small rattling pot, part of the pea family. It's a pity that you guys couldn't smell. If you could have actually broken open one of the seeds of the small rattling pot. It actually smells like peas. So yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, some of the pioneers doing their work again in this particular environment, trying to recover. But yeah, as I was saying with the Bushmen, so as they stayed for about up to 2 weeks in a certain area in the Kalahari, it got to a certain situation that almost they're thinking like animals. So animals don't and never, wild animals never overutilize a certain area. If they see, okay, it gets to a point where the tannin content in plants as a defense mechanism becomes too high, then it gets to a point that they will shift and leave the area and go to an area that is a bit more higher in nutritional value. And it's getting to a point that they gotta just have an area to relax, actually, where they've been going into. Obviously for the recovery and returning to normality and gaining its right nutritional values again and whatsoever. But yeah, so the Bushmen were actually working in that situation because that's how they thought about life. We cannot overutilize because then there will be nothing left for the future that we have to live in, this green Kalahari concept. But the Bushmen, on the other hand, didn't just live in the green Kalahari. They migrated from the south of the Kalahari all the way to the north in Namibia, through Botswana, all the way through as it is. So there's no overutilization happening anywhere you go. Another stunning sociable weaver's nest coming up in front of us here. Donna, you've just asked if there's any invasive vegetation in the Kalahari. Donna, there's some possibilities of the mesquite prosopis, and that's generally where you could get typically where there was an old farmhouse on a farmland close by. Like Tswalu was bought up specifically from farms that got sold onto the property basically, and so that's how the property grew so big, from farms that extended the property size. But anyways, as these farms obviously all had their own farmhouses, the mesquite prosopis is a tree that grows quite big, rather large actually. So this particular tree was planted close to these homesteads, if I can put it that way, and so it's a nice amount of shade for the animals that they gathered in a small enclosure, like a kraal, which we call it basically, and that was a nice amount of shade. You know what, the Kalahari 60, 70 years ago in some areas were looking quite hectic through other droughts that it's been going through and so on. And some of the trees didn't provide enough shade at that given point in time. So lots of these big trees were planted at that time. Well, not lots, excuse me, just at these homesteads or so. But the moment Tswalu started close to 50 years ago, it's gotten to a point immediately where these trees were taken care of. They were ring-barked, and the moment you ring-bark a specific tree, like the mesquite prosopis, you cut off the moisture supply layer, which is the cambium layer, and it then gets to a point that it will get to a situation where you cut off the moisture flow of that particular plant, and then you take care of it in that situation. So yeah, invasive trees, that's pretty much as far as it goes. There's a few few smaller forbs and so on that could be invasive, but yeah, the thing is, Tswalu is about, I'd say, 90% to 99% actually full-on natural true vegetation. That's, yeah. Morgan is focused on the shepherd's tree, the camel thorn tree in front of us here, but there's something quite interesting in that particular nest in front of us there. Morgan, I don't know if you should go a bit more forward to get closer to that, or are you good enough there, hey? So thinking about that particular white little patch, to the right-hand side of the screen, there's unfortunately a bit of twigs flopping around every now and again in front of it. But there's this white patch on the bottom end of that nest over there. Okay, so there's a branch hanging in front of it, but yeah, there's a little white patch. And that white patch, we spoke earlier, quite early this morning, we spoke about how this particular sociable weavers, their functions in nature and how they're helping out nature specifically. So this is that particular function that's happening there. Here, they're helping out a pygmy falcon. The crazy thing is the pygmy falcon would literally defecate out of the entrance of his opening, where the potential vacant room has opened up from a room of where a pair of sociable weavers were nesting inside there. So then this feces would then form this sort of a white door entrance, and that is typically where he's staying at inside the nest. Now the sort of agreement goes where he's saying, listen, I won't catch your chicks, but then he waits for that right moment when the entire colony goes out feeding. Then he would sometimes, especially this time of the year when they have chicks, he will then steal one or two or so. But generally the pygmy falcon will go out from this location where he gets hosted, and then he flies out to the bush catching we got like sand skinks, two-striped Kalahari skinks, tree skinks. So he catches lizards and those type of things generally around a location like this. But yeah, that is his house that we can see there, the pygmy falcon nest. On the other side, further down that way, closer to speaking of which, of a camel thorn tree and birds helping out nature, we got two more giraffe. That's a bit too far. But yeah, a couple of more giraffe actually in this area feeding, again, making use of the mother plant as we spoke about it this morning. But yeah, gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Yeah, these weavers are working this nest in and out. Benji, you've just asked if insects would make their home in a sociable weaver's nest, for instance. I've seen actually wasps making nests on the edges of these nests itself and so on. Some of the ants would go inside and make a nest as well, but then the birds will consume the insects itself again. It doesn't happen often, but yes, I've seen it before happening actually. But then it goes furthermore down the line where you could easily get to a situation of of a specific situation where you have had slender mongoose or even yellow mongoose at times climbing a tree up the nest and literally then getting to the top end and literally snatching these insects or trying to get these bugs out in the top, especially in a dry season or so. Like dry season is one thing, but in droughts, for instance, that we've had before, droughts and drought seasons that we've had here before, we've seen the funniest things and the most interesting things happening, where we typically get to a situation where these animals do funny behavior, well, get to funny actions and behaviors and so on. It gets to a point where you literally get a mongoose climbing a tree just because the food resources are available in the tree itself. Excuse me. Rather than digging them out from the soils, typically mongoose look for little bugs, insects, grasshoppers, and obviously rodents and snakes. Rachel, you have just asked how long would it take a colony of those sociable weavers to build a nest like that. Now, typically, you would look at something like a nest that size, well over 20 to 30 years almost. Some of the nests quite interesting that I've seen in certain areas, from areas to areas, that it differentiates from areas to other areas. It gets to a point that it depends on how much food availability is in that area and how much is the population grown, and that will determine the rate and the pace at which the nest will grow at specifically. So some of the nests in some areas where food availability is not that high in amount and they've got to work hard for it, obviously means the population won't grow that fast and that quick. So that basically comes down to a situation that you could easily get to a point where it could take much longer, and it's a slow growing process as it is. I'm just looking at some spotted hyena tracks coming across here on the road again. Now this, I presume, is literally the same spotted hyena that's been coming through in this particular area, all the way from the mountains where we had that waterhole close to the mountains this morning. And so what's happening is that you could typically get to a point where these animals cover huge distances as it is. Just depending on, again, food availability, coming back to the question of the nest itself as well. And so, excuse me. What's quite interesting about the nest itself as well is that you get some nests that would be in 6 years' time, doubling its size. And then there's some nests that take over 15 years to get to the real size of like, sometimes it needs like 10 years just to grow even just a tiny bit over half of what it was 10 years ago, if that makes sense, basically. Yeah, this temperature is going down. Mark, you've just asked if generations of sociable weavers make use of the same nest. Mark, for sure, indeed. They do that because the thing is that as the population grows, it comes back to what I've said earlier this morning, looking at teamwork, family units, partnerships. That's the way to survive in the Kalahari. It doesn't say if it's a semi-desert environment, things goes a bit easier. It's still a desert environment, still a tough environment to live in. So typically it gets to a point that these animals need each other's help. So typically looking at the sociable weavers, the population will grow, and next year it'll grow even bigger, and next year it'll grow even bigger. And so as the population grow, they will continue expanding the exact same nest. So then it gets to a point literally that they continue going, continue building, and continue expanding on the exact same nest. Yeah, so as we're coming over those dune tops, I'm seeing quite a lot of oryx and eland, but within a kilometer's distance, a bit too far for us to catch there on a distance or so. But yeah, there's a lot of animals hiding in these dune streets. Actually, we're finding more and more species here. Actually, lots more eland in this area, but it's on more than a kilometer's distance at some points. We're going to try and take some roads to get closer to those gorgeous elands and some more oryx. But yeah, you can see they're clearly hiding in these dune streets where there's some bushes being covering the areas a bit more, where they're just trying to get away from the wind. Limiting factors are definitely not helping them this morning, as the wind is literally just taking away some of that hearing senses. And even the smell, I mean, when the wind is this strong, they literally could smell only the direction from where the wind is coming from to blowing towards them. Downwind from them, hearing and the smell is pretty much gone. So Kate, you've just asked one of my favorite questions. You've just asked if wild dogs is my favorite animal and why. So the thing is, wild dogs is, I'd say, one of my favorite animals for sure. I mean, it's most probably one of the most difficult questions as well, because there's a lot of special animals in the Kalahari. But something about dogs that is so special is specifically that family unity. You see, wild dogs work in a situation where, again, we're coming back to that hierarchy system where it's alpha male and female, beta male and female, and so it basically says first in line leaders, second in line leaders, and then you get your supportive unit, secondly coming in lastly supporting that leadership. Every man is, or every single individual is covered, and everybody's looking after each other. So there's one word that a wild dog pack represents at the bigger picture, and that comes down to love. They all represent so much love for each other. Say, for instance, a wild dog individual member, for instance, gets injured from a specific pack. They will have one specific dog that will stay behind with that particular dog that got injured, while the rest of the pack will go out and hunt and catch something, obviously in a distance away from where they left those dogs behind, come back to where that can I say, a babysitter situation happens, and then it becomes a bit gross there in that situation. Then they start regurgitating meat for the injured dog as well as the babysitter in that situation. So there's, I guess it comes down to, they take care of each other so deeply and operate in love together, and I guess that's the thing. But on top of that all, wild dogs are really, really beautiful animals. In South Africa, you get like 3 different species, subspecies of wild dogs, which is basically your northern species. Then you get your central eastern section of the country wild dog, and then you get like your northwestern corner of South Africa typically. And these particular regions, you get, for instance, Kruger side, it's quite dark dogs. You get like blackish, quite a lot of colors of black coming in that particular area, and black, tiny bit of tints of white, and tiny bit of yellows coming through. If you come over to Eastern Cape, Eastern Cape specifically, over to KwaZulu-Natal and those areas, you could get a bit of a combination between whitish and blackish, darkish dogs. In the Kalahari, you get a nice combo, but then there's sometimes a bit more of a representation of more yellow colors coming in and so on. And that goes hand in hand with the Kalahari's environment as well. But on a complete different note, when you look at wild dog populations in South Africa, I mean, the population have been fluctuating so much in Africa that 2 years ago it was coming up to about 500 dogs in this country in the wild. I mean, that's already that's already quite endangered. That's extremely endangered looking at the numbers, and that's outside the meta population in Kruger basically, for instance. But when you're looking at now, the numbers keep on fluctuating. So one year it's 450 dogs, other year it's 350 dogs, and then because it gets to a situation that these dogs do get affected by canine distemper and rabies, actually, because they're carriers of these diseases as it is. So, yeah, it's of great honor and privilege to be able to say that you work with such beautiful dogs from many different areas, that comes from different areas as it is. Sometimes you gotta have to get dogs in from a different area. So sometimes these days you can't really actually say that that particular dog is from that particular subspecies or whatsoever, as you see what I mean. But I guess at the end of the day, they're all so beautiful. Doesn't matter the subspecies and so on. But yeah, wild dogs, very special because they are looking so well after each other. And that is the biggest story for me with regards to them. They're a pretty good example for us as mankind today as well. So for breakfast, you actually commenting there saying you love how the grass color and plant colors are differentiating between the different dunes, and as we go further west. Yes, you are very right. The further we go west, and actually what we're literally looking at now, we are nearing the western edges of the reserve. Well, not edges, but we're getting close to the fourth ecotype in the west. And in the west, it's some of the last remains of the inland ocean that used to be in the green Kalahari. Now, this all, once upon a time, used to be underwater because it was a freshwater inland ocean that used to be here. And the last deposits of the inland ocean that was in this particular area and region is still basically present in this western sections of the reserve. And so that automatically, with the minerals that is present within these salt pans and calcrete soils that you get in this area, is a high presence of that particular, what I said about the calcrete. You'll get like limestone, but mostly the calcrete salt pans being the remnants of that last deposits of the inland ocean. And so the presence of those particular minerals in these soils, you'll get to a situation where the vegetation will change because of the rock minerals being present in this area. So yes, that's coming back to your question. Definitely the plants will differentiate as we're progressing from one ecotype to another. The area that we're currently in, we're sort of central reserve at the moment, central western edges. And so to this western edges of the reserve, there's more dunes running northwest from here, but this is the closest point where you'll get to that boundary line between the dunes and the thicket line in the west. And so yeah, you could typically see an environment like this changing as you go continuously driving in this wonderful reserve.
How insane is that animal?
This is out of this world. Fantastic. Good, Mama.
Wow, what a way to start off.
Just such an incredible privilege to be out here. It just keeps on delivering.
There you go, there you go. Heart is pumping right now.
3, 2, 1. You are live, you are live.
Look at this, everybody. We've got a live kill.
The croc's holding the tail, it's holding tight. Lucky wildebeest.
There's nowhere to go. This is a disaster in the making.
This is the first leucistic zebra I have ever seen in my life.
Oh, here comes a lion. Run, little guy. Go on.
something that I have never seen before in my entire life that you are now watching live.
My heart is in my mouth, everybody.
Look at this. It's gonna make it. It's going, it's going.
This is just too magical. Hi, little guys. That's great, isn't it?
Has it just pretended to be dead? That is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Look at that. Scuba Steve has got a friend.
You've got a friend in me.
It couldn't be a better morning. This is just too special.
Oh my goodness, we've got a turtle.
How epic is the fact that we're coming to you live from the Chobe River?
It's the most incredible feeling to be here. This is live and we're in Rwanda. This is a very, very different adventure, charged with emotion.
Look at that little zebra about to be born. There's the head. Oh, you clever mare. Well done.
I did not think I would ever face my fears like this.
You know how much I would have loved you to actually experience with this particular view that we're looking at. Just wanted you to be here specifically experiencing, yes, the wind is quite strong and everything, but just looking at this wonderful landscape, just thinking about how magical this ecosystem is and thinking about how everything exists in this particular environment. I mean, it's just so gorgeous. What I'm going to do is I want you to actually look at this area and just we're gonna have a moment of silence and just listen. Just see whatever you can listen. I know you're going through camera and sounds and audios and things at the moment, but I want you to listen and just observe. And just try to look at and try to feel what I'm feeling at the moment looking at this ecosystem. It's just pure beauty, grace, and peace that literally comes through here. As quiet as it can be in that particular structure, you could have extreme amount of action. Specifically speaking about the dogs earlier and everything, things can just happen and turn upside down the other way around. Happen completely different in other times and so on. But yeah, so cool how there's so many different feelings and times happening in an ecosystem like this, so vast. So thinking about it, it is really special seeing what we're seeing and what we really been privileged with, well, that we are so privileged enough to actually being able to experience this and being part of a conservation concept being rather large, so big as what's happening on this particular game reserve. Especially worked on many other reserves, worked for many different lodges before, where there's different conservation concepts happening. But I'll tell you, out of a guiding point of view, to be part of something like this is just so special. So thank you for joining us for this morning safari. We're going to be live on your sunset safari this afternoon again, with a couple of the eastern section of the reserve on the other side. But yeah, see you Central African time this evening again at 4 o'clock.